Hey everybody, my name's Javen and welcome to the first of what I hope to be many videos I'm calling the Squadrons Strategy Series, which will be focused mainly on the finer points of gameplay surrounding Star Wars Squadrons with a little bit of theory crafting put in for good measure. In this video, I'm going to briefly go over some initial thoughts I had surrounding control configurations and button placements, regardless of which hardware you choose, and then go a bit more in depth about how I plan to configure my current HOTAS, the Thrustmaster Warthog. Granted, I know that there will be a great number of different controller types and preferences that people across all three platforms will be using, but I'm convinced a lot of these topics that I'm going to talk about will be able to transfer without too many issues. I'm sure to most of you that a lot of these will sound like common sense things. Frankly, that's probably a good thing. However, if not, hopefully they do after this video. Number 1, keep your most used functions in your most accessible of places. A way to think about this is a scenario in which you're limited by how many total buttons you have, like on a controller versus a HOTAS. With a HOTAS, you can just pull your trigger to shoot your guns and press another to fire a missile. One input to one output for each function. But what if you were playing with an Xbox controller? Maybe you needed to use that second button for something else. This is where double press and long press functionality can be quite useful. In fact, you could hypothetically do this for every button on your entire controller. However, the issue can quickly become a scenario in which you risk pressing the wrong buttons the wrong ways in the middle of a heated engagement. This is why, regardless of what controller types you play with, your most used functions should always be the most accessible. When you get a missile coming at you, the last thing you want to do is wait for your countermeasure's long press to finish. Number 2, keep your areas of functionality close together. Things you don't want to do is to mix up ping target with divert shields, or fire missile with max engine power. The way that you protect yourself from this type of mix-up is by compartmentalizing your buttons based on function type. In our example, you can consider ping target and fire missile as external functions to your craft, while divert shields and max engine power as internal to your craft. How you arrange what buttons focus on which areas is entirely up to the individual, but it does help to have them organized in this way so that your left hand's responsibilities differ from what your right hand's are. Any drummers out there will know exactly what I'm talking about. Another example is holding a shield in your left hand while holding a sword in the other. Your left hand's for defense, your right hand for offense. This last one's easy because it's something that everybody does. Number 3, just do what feels right. At the end of the day, there's no wrong way that you could do this. You could play WASD as a mouse and keyboard, Legacy Southpaw with an Xbox controller, Crazy Badass with a Guitar Hero guitar, or Sweaty Tryhard like me with a HOTAS. Don't be afraid to experiment with how you interact with this game. The best solutions are organic ones that come naturally over time. On that note, I want to spend the rest of the time I have with you guys talking about what I feel works best for me, using what I have in the form of the Warthog. Again, in no way am I attempting to advocate that you should use my personal key mappings to achieve success in the coming battles. The only goal is to get gears spinning in your heads so that we can have some good conversations about these types of things. With that, let's talk about our options. We'll start with the throttle. Currently, Squadrons does not utilize multi-engine throttles, so we're going to keep the independent throttles together for the time being. Number 4, the coolie hat switch, is going to control our power distribution. After mulling it over, I couldn't really see a reason why I would want to incrementally change power settings, so I've only mapped max power settings for weapons that point in front of us, shields that are up giving us cover, and engines that are behind us while down is rebalancing those systems. Number 8 and number 15 are currently duplicates for me at this time because I'm not certain how often I'm going to be changing my shield direction. If I find myself utilizing it more often than not, then I will most likely keep it on the number 15 three-way boat switch. You generally don't want to have too many high-use things on the floor of the throttle that you'll have to take your hand off in order to change. Number 14 is another three-way switch that's actually a toggle called the China hat. We've mapped countermeasures to aft on that. Number 16 in traditional flight sim is usually a speed brake, but in Squadron's case, this switch, when it locks forward, will function as boost, and when toggled aft will function as drift. A quick thing about pushing the coolie hat in is that it's rather difficult to not hit any of the directional buttons when doing so, and as a result, I'll very rarely map any functionality to this button, and frankly the same goes for the CMS switch on the left side of the joystick as well. On the front of the throttle, we have an 8-way POV switch labeled as number 2 that I am currently leaving open to probably serve as a contextual radial menu as more information becomes available, with number 5 being its potential interaction button. I unfortunately do not currently own a set of rudder pedals, so I plan on mapping the number 1 X-axis to roll my craft, with the number 4 as a possible targeting radial menu interaction button, but more on that later. Moving over to the joystick, we can see that I currently plan on utilizing a yaw pitch configuration, which will make it easier to line up more precise shots, especially at range. Number 2, another 8-way POV, will more than likely function as a targeting menu radial interaction, with the interact button being on the front of the throttle as described earlier. This was done mostly out of necessity because whenever I interact with the POV, it is with my thumb, and really the only other button on the joystick I would be able to reliably use would be the Master Mode control button on the side of the stick, and even then it doesn't really allow me to keep good stick control while doing so. Thus it made more sense to have the selector button be on the throttle. Another option I'm considering pending any issues in the terms of service agreement is to just press the interact button after holding a direction for longer than a second or two on the POV switch. By doing this, we eliminate the need for having a designated button be set as an interact. Number 3 is a 4-way switch that I've decided will be my left and right auxiliary module employments, as well as their secondary fire methods as well. Number 4 is another 4-way switch that I've decided to utilize for target acquisition. Pushing forward targets what is in front of me, pushing aft targets my attacker, pushing right selects the next target, and pushing left brings up the targeting wheel. Number 8, or the paddle switch, I usually use as a form of recentering my eye point while I'm flying in virtual reality, which I will almost certainly be doing most of the time, and it's not even guaranteed that this functionality will even be implemented in the game at this point. That being said, I keep it here as a reference just in case they actually do. Number 7, the nose wheel steering button on this page, and number 4, the master mode control button on the next page, go hand in hand, so I'll talk about both of them together. The nose wheel steering button will function as an acknowledgement to squad pings, and the master mode control button will function as pinging or pointing at your target, which is why I have it using my pointer finger. Of note on this last page, I've chosen to keep the number 2 or pickle button unbound currently because of how auxiliary weapons have secondary modes of fire, and I'm really not a fan of long presses or double presses unless I have no other choice. Finally, we have our first trigger as a gun employment. However, our second trigger can be utilized in a few different ways. Again, depending on the terms of service, one press of the second trigger could do one or all of select target ahead, ping that target, and maximize weapons power, or just fire a missile. Notice how most of my craft's systems functionality is done on the throttle, and most of my craft's combat and targeting functionality is done on the joystick. This was intentionally done by me because it just felt right. Again, I want to stress that this setup is by no means anything more than what works for me. Thanks for watching, guys. I'm looking forward to your feedback in the comments, and feel free to hit me up on the Squadrons Discord server as well. I'm Javen, and I'll see you on the next Squadrons Strategy Series.